Hey, what's happening everybody? My name is Haydn Adams with A Designer Who Codes. In today's tutorial, I want to talk about the box model. I'm going to use Adobe InDesign. If you're a graphic designer and you're kind of stepping into the web design world, the box model is something you should kind of really figure out how it works because it's really, really important when it comes to design. I'm going to use both the site called CodePen, which is CodePen.io, and I'll go back and forth to InDesign and Safari/CodePen. Now you can be in Chrome, you can be in Firefox. I would not recommend Internet Explorer, but I want to talk about how the box model works when it comes to designing on the web. This is more of a fundamentals piece and just also a refresher because it's important to understand how the box model works when you design going forward. And with that, let's get started. All right, so let's answer the biggest question. So what is the box model? If we break it down, the box model is, I couldn't even type the number correctly. It is 42. No, it is not 42, even though if you've read Douglas Adams' books, well, it is 42. Okay, bad jokes aside, I'm gonna continue. So what is the box model? It's essentially width plus padding plus margin equals the box I can't even see. Let's move it up a little bit. Equals total width. And the essential same thing that happens with height, that if you define a height, so if I say height plus padding plus margin equals total height. Now, what does that mean when it comes to coding? Well, that means that if we have a specific width and we add padding and we add margin, that becomes the total width. Let's try that in CodePen. So in CodePen, if you've never been here before, it's pretty cool. CodePen.io lets you kind of play in the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript worlds. Now, I'm going to ignore the JavaScript for this lecture just because I'm going to focus on HTML and do some coding in CSS to explain what the box model is. So I'm going to type div and say this is a box, and close it by saying >div. So by default, there's a box, but we really can't see it because we have to then add some actually color to it. A lot of times when I code, I like to actually write a background color. So if I say div space curly brackets, because we're now in the CSS world, which is different than the HTML world, we have to connect the div tag, which is right here. I'm going to say div and background color green. And as you can see, that this width goes across the screen. Now by default, what's called, if we write a little note, any block level element, element, there's a good word, will fill the parent with the width. What that means is the parent is this body, this white space. So if I also comment this out, which is command slash or slash asterisk asterisk slash, just a note for any people who are new to writing CSS, any block level, which is a div tag, element will fill the parent with the width. So the thing about it is that this width is more like X. And I want a fixed width to do easy math for right now. So I'm going to say 500 pixels is our width. So I'm going to change this up here and say width equals 500 pixels. Now this box kind of gets cut in half, but this box stays at 500 pixels. So if we add some padding, so I'm going to add padding equals 10, padding 10 pixels. And if it's hard to see this black text, let me just change the color to white, just so you can read the text a little better. Notice that padding will add it on all four sides. If we don't specify which side of padding, then we're going to have a padding of 20. So this is going to be 20 pixels. And I probably should have made this text a little smaller on the screen. There we go. So If I say 10 pixels of padding, that's because this is 10 and this is 10 equals 20. If we add margin to this, same thing about padding. All four sides if we don't specify which side it is. So if I say margin 10 pixels, now it's going to push 10 pixels off the edge of this area. And if we write just a bit more code, we say body border 110px solid and purple. Well, we should see, there's our body, that 10 pixels, once again, here's our parent, the body tag by default, and we can see that space, if I move this a little bit bigger on the screen, or actually let's make it down a little bit so you can still read our numerical values. So once again, that this 10 pixel margin, if you take it out, goes right up and hugs the corner. So now if we put it back in, margin 10 pixels, that's essentially 20 pixels. So 20 pixels equals margin. Now the big question also comes up, what is the difference between padding and margin and when should I use it? In the box model, if we use InDesign example, if I write some text, lorem ipsum. So if I want this box to be right next to each other, that those boxes are touching like a box model going on here, this width is 2.42 pixels. So if we change our, I thought I had it set, there we go. So now we have this box, let me make them a little better per the same design. So if I say 500 pixels, now this box of lorem ipsum is the same as this box. In theory, it's kind of hard to say 1-to-1, and this one's 137%. And if I go down to 100, in theory, we should have a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a little hard to show. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close in there. Once again, pixels to pixels, this is a 500 pixel box, and that's a 500 pixel box. However, we added the 10 pixels into this design. Now, there's no by default padding when it comes into InDesign. However, there's an inset. So if I go to my text frame options in InDesign, the inset is essentially your padding. So what I can do is I can say, okay, I want my padding to be 10 pixels. And equates to 0.1389. That's, I never knew that actually. Pixels, I guess, per inch in theory in that way. So 1.389 inches equates to the 10 pixels. And now you can see that if I make this box, where are my colors? I reset my color palette and then I can't find everything. So excuse me while I look for my colors because there it is. And we'll make an orange box. So just like we have, and I'll make this text, I guess it's black be fine for right there. I was going to make it a green box, but I already made it a gold box. Anyways, so in the lorem ipsum area going on, notice how the text pushes away inside the box. That's your padding, or it pads the space inside of it. Now the margin is the space outside of it. In InDesign, that's a text wrap essentially. If I turn my wrap around and I want to say 0.125 inches, and if we zoom into this design, unfortunately InDesign makes small lines, but we'll talk about these pieces right here. As you can see, the color of this box is the edge. Outside of it essentially is your margin. It pushes things away. That's how we describe margins. So margins, if I use some notes, margins push boxes away from boxes. Padding pushes the content inside of a box. So we can take out the body area now. There we go. That's better. So margins push box away from other boxes essentially. So in a box model world, the two areas that we're looking at, if I make another box and I make it this size, I can't move my text any closer. Let me use a ruler for this piece while I do a little design. So I, in theory, could not get anything closer than these two because the margins are right there. And if I were to try to move them, chaos will ensue because I didn't set it all perfectly in here, but I wanted to show what the padding looks like versus margin. So inside of the box model, in theory, it is width plus padding plus margin equals total width. Now this is great if I have fixed widths and I want to do a lot of math, but I'm an art major. I got a BFA degree. I didn't major in math, and a lot of times I can mess up in math really easily. So how can we make the box model work for us and not have to do math so much? Because if we think about it, a lot of times on the web, if I were to change my code and I take out this width, what's going to happen is this becomes, in theory, 100%. So how do I do my math when it comes to 100% plus 20px plus 10px? Because, well, this is a problem because I might have to do 80% or 89 or something like that. There's a way to really wrangle the box model to really make this work to your advantage. And let me show you how to do that. So let's create a design that includes two boxes. I'm going to remove this I'll just put it down at the bottom. And I will comment it away by selecting and just turning them off. Now the text just goes away. So I'm going to create a little bit of a more advanced design. I'm going to say div ID, and I will say larger box, and I'll go down and say close div, and I'm going to put a box inside of a box. So I'll say div ID inside box. I guess I should say outside and inside in theory. Now, of course, I use the div. Let me take this all out. So by default, nothing's going on. And let me close this div. And this is my inside box. And this is outside my inside box. Okay, maybe these names should have not been perfect that way, but we'll just go with it for right now. So the outside box, let's first design that piece. Now in CSS with the ID, I have to say # outside and box. And we'll make this one background color. Oh, is there like a smoke one, I think? There is a wheat one, I know that. Let's go with wheat. There it goes. There's the wheat for the outside box. Now also note in the box model that inherently the boxes are transparent unless you set a color. So the inside box right here is transparent by default, which then it goes up to this parent and says, well, there's no color for inside. What's the color for outside? And that's wheat. If we want to set a color for our inside, we're going to say inside box. And let's go with black. Why not? I haven't done black in a while. Background color black. There we go. Oh, and we have to change our color to white. What's kind of funky, I used to type this for years and still mess this up, is that everything is like font weight, font style, except when it comes to color. Color is just by default color. And you have to know that this is really the font color when you say color, and everything else has something attached to the color if it's not that. So let's add a few design principles to the outside box. Let's add padding of 50 pixels. And let's put our width, that's pretty big. Let's set our width to 500 pixels, and let's set this to 20 just because it's a little outrageous. We'll actually go 1,000. Shooting on the hip, well, I can only do so much. So once again, our outside box width equals 1,000 and padding equals 20. So if we do our math, there's no margin in this case. So if we come back up here, let's take this number out. And we're going to say, what did I say? I said 1,000 pixels. 1,000 pixels width. And we have 20 and 20 equals 40. Here comes that math I was talking about. There's no margin. So essentially, if I add one more 0 to make it 1,000, our total width, if we take this one out, or we'll just put it down below, equals 1040 pixels. So that's our total width of our box that we cannot exceed inside, or I should never have used inside outside. Let's just call this one box 1, box 2. That's box 1, box 1, and box 2. That's better because I'm saying inside and outside of these, and it can get really, really confusing. There we go. I have box 1 and I have box 2. My apologies for that. I was thinking it was smart until I actually was describing it, and now it became just really confusing. All right, box 1 is 1,040 equals 1,040 for our total width of our design. Pretty cool. Looks pretty good. So I have to figure out now how I want this inside box to be. Well, by default, we then need to make the same size in order for it to fit. So in box 2, I want to say width equals 100% to hold the space. So there's my box 2, and I should have taken the black out, which I did. So we'll say width equals 100%. Now if I add some margin space, right, there we go, semicolon could also help too. If I add some margin to this area, say margin equals 10 pixels. So now what's going to happen is it's going to start creating some problems because this area indented in, but this area did not indent in. So there inherently is a problem because the width doesn't equate and goes above the number. So I'm going to take it out because if we use our box methodology or our box model, by default, if I use one of these divs or anything of a block level element, so if you're not familiar with what that is, Google what is, H's, P's, UL's, LI's, not images, not span tags, but basically if you're working in the div model of anything, that's a block level element and it will fill the parent within or with the width. So what I can do is I said margin 10 pixels and background color black and color white. What that'll do is that'll fill the space minus 10 pixels. So what's going to happen is that in theory height, or in this case width, is an unknown number for our width. I just realized I was missing a paren right there. And then our padding over here plus padding is, what did I say again? It is, oh, it's a margin, not padding. So what happens is that that's total width minus the margin. And so now we're working with the box model because now we're fitting inside of it as long as we do not specify the overall width. If I do that, or if I say width equals 1,000 pixels, now it extends the box past that, and now that becomes a problem because now our top box is not 1,000 pixels. So you have to be aware of how you're writing your code, but you also have to rely on how the web works because as a block level element comes in, let me take out the width piece of it all, it'll conform to the parent of its element, which is box 1, and the inside box doesn't contain a width, it contains a margin. So this is essentially what the box model looks like. It just contains, if we go back to the very beginning review, it's essentially width or height plus padding plus margin equals total width or height appropriately. And that's how you can start designing on the web. Now, one thing I will say is do not use fixed heights in here. My one little caveat I have to say is that with fixed heights, the problem with this is that on the web, if you use Facebook, Instagram, Notice that I'm scrolling up and down, but I'm not scrolling side to side. Width should be fixed to a certain degree. Now, there are discussions about mobile versus desktop. And yes, there are breakpoints and what are called media queries and all of that. However, I more or less fix my widths to a certain max width, and I do not use fixed heights. I will use a min height to do something, but I won't use a max height. That's because I don't want to lock things into play. However, if you do want a fixed size, then yes, you would use a fixed height. But essentially, this is what the box model is. Width and height plus padding plus margin equals total width. I hope this really helps you in your design journey. Yes, this is coding. This is the basics of how the web works. But the more you can get used to playing around different sizes and pieces and margins and paddings and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, the better you'll be at a designer on the web, because you can't just move box like an InDesign. That'd be awesome. I could just put text here and do this. Move my box, let it go, and it's in theory, it's fixed on the screen. On the web, we have to understand how the box works. I can't just click on my control key, drop it up and say text frame options. And so you have to be aware of how it works and also the inherent rules of the web when it comes to knowing that margins push boxes away and padding pushes the content inside of a box. And that is the box model. Once again, my name is Haydn Adams with A Designer Who Codes. Thanks so much for watching and have a fantastic day.